Hello everybody. So how do you go from this to this? Well, this is my tutorial on how to make a live orchestra that's recorded in a bit of a small room, much bigger. So unless you have Abbey Road, tel decks, or these massive halls, most of the orchestral recordings you can get at a reasonable price will be recorded in slightly smaller rooms, more like chamber size, I would say. And so there are many different things you can do to sort of simulate a bigger room, but you have to do it properly. Otherwise, you can destroy transients and you can just destroy the tone overall. So this is my kind of secret, well, not so secret anymore, plugin chain, to kind of boost the size of an orchestra cleanly without having to smear everything disgustingly. So I hope you find this interesting, guys. Let's dive into it. So just a quick reminder that you need to fine-tune your mic positions, of course. Here we just have close and decatry. Here we needed to use some close because some instruments are kind of lost in the decatry and the balance is off. Usually you should start with the decatry or with like a kind of general mic position. So decatry and outrigs are good mic positions. And try to build most of your sound with these and then kind of complete with other mics if you're really missing something volume-wise, right? But sometimes even though you have your decatry, outrigs, whatever, perfectly set, it's just a small room, right? So this comes on top of that once you've done your job properly with the mics. So let's turn everything off. Now, first insert is just volume, ignore that. Then we just have an EQ. This is mid-side, but it's just to fix a width problem in the low end, so you can ignore that. But with these two EQs here first in the chain, I'm cutting some mids. So this helps kind of reduce this small room kind of boxiness that usually happens in the mids for orchestral, but most big room recordings have this sort of, muddiness in the mid-range. So it's quite common to cut it. So it already helps clean a bit. Now, next we have soothe. I actually have two soothes, and I'm going to explain. So the first one is actually to fight resonances in the bass. So if you compare close mics and room mics, close mics tend to have a lot more dynamics and a lot more kind of random resonances because they're just so close, and all the little variations of one specific instrument will be, very obvious. Also, smaller rooms have more room modes, which are like resonances in the bass. So it's quite common to have lots of big kind of resonances the smaller the room is. So this kind of helps fight that a little bit and helps in a way simulate a bigger room by controlling the low end a bit more. Now, of course, it's a bit subtle. I wouldn't use too much of it, especially on staccatos, but yeah. Now, again, smaller rooms and more closer captures tend to have more dynamics and more sharp, sudden sounds. So Soothe kind of helps compress all of that and give it a bit more smoothness, as if you had more players together, a less sort of defined, spiky high end, if that makes sense. Although it's very subtle here. Sometimes I use more. If you have very sharp accents, like trumpet accents from like a close trumpet, it can help, really compress a bit more and add evenness to the spectrum. Then we have Gullfoss. So same idea, it tries to emulate a more even capture by controlling individual things that might poke out, which is really similar to like close mics. It's subtle, but these two plugins are adding a bit of density, and it kind of helps prepare the sound for what comes next. Then I like to put Kramer tape sometimes. Again, saturation kind of absorbs attacks and transients, so you will have a bit less dynamics, a bit less pokey dynamics. But I just use a bit of it, but it helps. With the extreme example here, it just adds a lot more density. So of course you don't want to hear it, but it helps, add that density that a smaller room is missing. So none of this is reverb yet. It's just preparing the terrain. Then room widener. So this is my plugin. You can read more about it if you Google room widener, or you can just watch my video on room widener. So the idea of this plugin is to basically create reflections on the opposite side. So for example, you might have more violin or an instrument on the left, you know? For example, I panned basses on the right, violins on the left. In the closed mics, or even in the Deca you might have more violins on the left. So this will kind of create a delay, a stereo slap delay, and kind of invert the panning of the instruments. So it's going to create reflections on the opposite side, but darker and quieter. So it creates more density. Say you have a violin staccato on the left, it will create an echo of the staccato on the right, mirrored, but darker and a few milliseconds later. So this kind of adds these early reflections that a small room might be missing, and kind of smears things a little bit, but fairly transparently. It's not very dramatic, right? So that's room widener, and it helps add a bit more density. Let me show you. So it's subtle. I put it at a fairly subtle setting, but again, this process is just about having lots of little steps that help the orchestra without destroying the sound. So of course, if we put too much of it, it sounds a bit bathroomy and there is no tail, so it sounds a bit weird, but you get how it can help, right? Then we have another short room reverb. So I just use this in parallel. This is like a parallel chain. You could just use it in as an insert if you want. Then you would want to turn the mix down. I'm using just a little bit of it. So if you listen to just the level of this reverb, it's quite... That's the dry signal. That's just the wet signal. So as you can see, it's much quieter. The wet signal is quieter than the dry signal. It's 1.1 seconds. The position and diffusion are almost to the max. This particular reverb, SP2016, is great at sort of diffusing a sound cleanly. So it's not really transforming the sound, adding like ugly low resonances. It's really kind of neutral, but straight up creating a bit of a blur, a bit of a hazy feel. And again, I don't want to create a huge tail, so for now, at least. So 1.1 seconds is fine, right? And then this is just trimmed to level match. So you have lots of little steps which help kind of physically fight the issues you might have with a small room. And then once you've done all this kind of preparation, you can just put your whole send. It's just a simple whole reverb, 2.3 seconds, just make it as wet as you want. But you know, the orchestra will actually sound bigger than if you skipped all these steps. Let me just now turn off all the inserts and keep the whole. So you can see that the whole is doing something, of course, but the inserts also. Listen to how close the trumpets feel, the double tongues. Now, you can even push this process a little bit more if you want. Depends how bold you want to be with it. Obviously, it can be a little artificial if you overdo it, but you get the point. Also, you don't have to make things that bright. Most of the kind of roominess effects are the soothe and what comes after. So if you want a more classical mix, a bit less modern and hyped, it will actually sound even bigger because highs kind of make things closer. So So yeah, the idea is think about what happens physically in a big room and try little steps which are not too destructive to emulate it. I hope you found this interesting, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!